Our next speaker, I was surfing around the web to learn more about him, and on his blog, on the About page, it says, just your average self-produced superhero. And I was like, well, that's cool. I can't wait to hear more. It's Rob Spector. He's a punk rock technologist and runs developer evangelism for Twilio, which is a great company. He's a self-prescribed internet junkie and previously worked at Sugar CRM and Boxy. He lives in Brooklyn like myself, and his mission is to celebrate the authentic. So compare that with some of your visions. The title of the presentation is going to be Your Execution Year. Rob, come on up on the stage. Hey! You want mine?
I have a green light coming from my pants.
Do you want me to give you a hand mic?
Sure, okay. You can. Oh, hey, there we go. Now we're back online. Awesome. You know, it was crazy. Back in the green room, I was talking with Evan, and we live 6 blocks apart in Brooklyn.
And we got to meet here.
And we meet
Montreal.
here in Montreal at Startup Festival. That's absolutely crazy. But it shows you how kind of small the world of startups is. So kind of off the jump, I had to apologize. I'm pinch hitting for our CEO, Jeff Lawson. Unfortunately, he had a death in the family they had to tend to this week. So I'm pinch hitting on his behalf, and I really appreciate you guys coming out to hear a little bit about your execution year. So this is you on the hockey stick, right here at the bottom. You're staring up. Boo. Oh, I'm sorry, the Bruins reference. I didn't realize I was in Montreal. My mistake. No, so you're sitting at the bottom of the hockey stick, and you're looking up at this growth curve that you aspire to attain. And everything is rainbows and Spartan warlords. You just raised your first significant chunk of money. This is your Series A or your Series B. You've gotten a little bit of traction. You've formed a decent nuclear team, and everything is looking fantastic. You've graduated from ramen to rice-a-roni. You're no longer living hand to mouth. You're no longer stressing about whether or not you're going to make payroll. You have dozens of employees. You have hundreds of customers. You are the prototypical post-revenue, pre-profit startup. And you're ready to cowboy up. You're ready to begin your execution year. But the problem is when you look out at the wealth of scholarship that's out there, the wealth of information that's out there for entrepreneurs, what do you not hear about? That section of the growth curve, from the very, very beginning to the very end. When you go on TechCrunch or you read on Hacker News, you hear all kinds of stuff about how to hone your pitch, or how to find a co-founder, or how to set up your cap table, or what kind of startup lawyer to hire. And then conversely, you hear a whole lot about the successful exits. You hear the billion-dollar valuations that these companies get on exit, or you hear about how NASDAQ destroyed Rob's hopes of having an early retirement with the Facebook IPO. It's kind of a weird set of attention. You hear a lot of stuff about the beginning, you hear a lot of stuff about the end, because when you look at the way that people describe startups, you start to feel like John Wayne. You start to feel like cowboying up during your execution year is going to be the best time of your startup, and it totally isn't. It's when the real unglamorous work begins. It's when you actually start to scale this company that you built. It is your execution year, and that's what I'm here to talk about. So my name is Rob Spector. I'm the director of developer evangelism for a outfit called Twilio. We're based in San Francisco, but I live and work in the greatest city in the world, which is New York. We're your very own programmable telephone company, and we make it very easy for you as a developer to send and receive text messages and make and receive phone calls. If you were going to call me anything other than a Bruins fan, you would probably call me an execution guy. So the place where I sit in the startup ecology is I come in during the growth year, during the execution year. Usually between early 30s or late 40s in terms of employee number. And the thing that I'm really passionate about in the startup space is growing big businesses. I've had a couple wins, definitely had a couple losses, and the jury's still out on a couple others. But the thing that I wanted to kind of talk to you guys at Startup Festival about is what it's like to be in your execution year and give you some of the 5 keys that I've picked up over the course of my career to making sure that you get on the other side of that growth curve. So here at Twilio, I'm about halfway through my 6th execution year, which is convenient because that's the total number of Stanley Cups that the Boston Bruins have won. So far, it's going fantastic. We obviously have a lot of work to do. But over the course of those 6 execution years, I've learned quite a bit. And I've learned kind of 5 key areas that I'd like to talk about after we talk about what the execution year is and what the execution year isn't. So, scaling a company, growing a company is fundamentally different than building a company. So the reason why a lot of startups start to fumble and fail at this stage is because the creative part starts to be, take a back seat to the execution piece, right? So after you've built the product, after you've gotten a decent amount of traction, and you have an idea of how to attack this space that you've declared as your passion, growing it depends more on fundamentals and on your team than it does on you. You know, you probably have a snug product market fit. You've determined that it works at, your business model works at least on a small scale, and you've gotten out of the infinite loop of pivot mania, changing your product to finally dial in what your identity is, both as a company and as a product. And hopefully by this time you have all the tools that you need to succeed. And by tools, I mean capital and the nuclear team that you're going to use to build out your startup. So we got 5 basic points. Hire like hell, sell at scale, stay hungry, fail fast, early, and often, and then finally obsess over the customer. So first, let's talk about hiring like hell. So when you're at the very beginning of your startup, when you're building the nuclear team, everything is a lot of fun, and your identity kind of just forms naturally from the 5 or 6 people that you have at your startup. But when you go into your execution year, that's when you start to see an inflection point. That's when the scale starts to tip. That's when your individual will and force is no longer enough to get something done. In your execution year, it's about how your team executes, not how you as the entrepreneur executes. And that's a big difference. And it's very hard for a lot of founders to wrap their head around. Because previous to this, all the teams have looked like mini versions of themselves. They've gotten a bunch of generalists, a bunch of people who can wear a whole bunch of different hats. They are really, really strong multitaskers. They're excellent dynamic human beings that have a whole bunch of skills to the table. But in your execution year, this is when specialism starts to matter. This is when specialists start to matter. This is when experience starts to matter. This is when your team starts to look a lot differently. And there are a few pro tips that you can take in terms of hiring. And when I put this at the beginning of the slide, I really mean that it's the most important piece, right? The team is going to determine whether or not your company succeeds in your execution year, not you. And if that's the case, you should take a look at hiring as a #1 priority, the same amount of priority that you put on your engineering team, and staff it appropriately. Now, when you're a resource-constrained startup, even after you raise that Series A or Series B, it's often tempting to relax the total amount of headcount that you have in your recruiting team. But we're in kind of a funky place macroeconomically right now. I mean, everyone's talking about how easy it is to raise money. You know, you can ask around to find out whether or not that's necessarily true, but I think we can all agree that one particular commodity has eclipsed American dollars in terms of the most precious resource a startup can have, and that's developer time. Nothing is more precious to a startup in your execution year than total time for your developer. And if that's the case, the only thing that's more expensive than building a good team to hire good developers is having a small team that hires bad developers, right? 1 or 2 bad developers can waste a lot of development time, which is now your precious resource. So what you're really looking for are small teams that have big responsibilities, right? So if you get this hiring machine rolling, what you're looking for is dividing the responsibilities for this execution year into very small, discrete units. And those small, discrete units have end-to-end responsibility for what they're working with. So I'm an engineer, so I naturally think in terms of engineering squads. And one of the things that's been really successful for us at Twilio has been dividing the engineering resources that we have into small, discrete units of 4 or 5 engineers apiece, and then giving them full responsibility for the products or the features that they ship. Keeping everything small and elite allows them to ship more frequently, which is ultimately one of the biggest factors to developer happiness that you can have. If your developers are not shipping except for every 3 to 4 months, a lot of those developers are going to jump your ship. Second thing is talking a little bit about culture. This is something that I'm probably most proud of at Twilio, and that's that we take culture as seriously as a product. We productize culture, and we make it the most important product that we ship. Now, this is something that's a little tricky in your execution year, right? Because when you're at the beginning, when you're 4 or 5 people, your culture is something that's kind of organic, right? Everybody stays until 10 because everyone's committed to the same goal. Everyone hangs out, plays Ultimate Frisbee on the same team because that is a core interest of one of the founders. Jeff Lawson, to my knowledge, doesn't play Ultimate Frisbee. If he did, I would really love to see it. I think it would be hilarious. But the culture piece is something that you should view as something that is as carefully manufactured and carefully maintained as your individual product. And that can happen in a couple of different ways. One of the biggest ways that you can fix that is by fixing the distance issue. Resource-constrained startups, when they're starting to scale, start to think that total number of engineering headcount is more important than the quality of the engineering team. And this is why a number of organizations choose to use offshoring or outsourcing for non-critical engineering functions, mostly stuff like QA or tools development or something ancillary to the main product itself. I'd like to go ahead and submit what I like to call the Spector corollary, which is the total number of bugs that end up in your final product is directly proportional to the distance in feet between your engineering team and your QA and support organization. So, if that distance is something that you are measuring in miles, time zones, or hemispheres, you are uniquely disadvantaged to others in your execution year. This is one of the biggest struggles that startups have. They think we need 150 engineers to compete with Google. You don't need 150 engineers to compete with Google. You just need 25 who are really good and committed about what they're doing. Now, one of the ways that you can reduce the distance between your QA and support team and your engineering team is to make it 0. And the way that you make it 0 is by instilling a culture of heavily automated testing and embedding QA personnel directly in your engineering squads. Keep the distance small and you will keep the bugs down. Next, let's talk a little bit about selling. This is something that engineers typically don't like to talk about. It's kind of like Bad Religion's second record in the sense it's the thing that no one talks about anymore, but it's actually something that is very significant for an individual startup. In fact, I would go so far as to say, oh, well, let me back up and make a couple more jokes. So no one ever talks about Steve Jobs, oh wow, that guy had a really great conversion rate. Or they were like, hey, do you remember when Justin Timberlake and the social network set up that really cool comp plan? Like, no one gives sales organizations and startups, I think, the attention that they deserve. Because when I look at a sales organization, I look at the single lever that can make the greatest amount of impact on the growth of an individual startup. So when you think about your sales organization, one of the things that I submit to you to consider when thinking about them is the distance between their key performance indicators and your revenue growth. If we take a look at a sales organization in those terms, we see that they are the easiest lever that we can pull. They are the simplest lever, the fastest lever. They are the most nimble part of the organization. They typically have the smallest amount of headcount, particularly in startup tech. And the dials that you can switch to make that lever move are very simple. So one of the biggest levers is comp plan. Make it easy, predictable, set up by someone who knows how to do this. Make sure it works good in the lean years, make sure it works in the strong years, and make sure it scales with your organization. If you have any illusions about changing your comp plan later to be less generous once you achieve a certain level of scale, go ahead and whip open your smartphone and check out the current stock price of Groupon, and you will see how incorrect you are. Another thing that's a really good point organizationally is make sure that you have one throat to choke. Make sure that you have one head of sales. A common mistake that a lot of startups do is try to have one director of channel sales, one director of inside sales, one director of outside sales, and all those people report to the CEO. That's really not a good plan for sustaining yourself over the course of your execution year. Your CEO needs to be focused on a wide variety of things, one of the most important of which is product. He can't do that if he's out there on the street selling or trying to deal with a whole bunch of different conflicting personalities. Your sales organization is the most competitive personality type in your entire company. So, if they are incented to compete with each other, like they are when they have different leaders, they will compete with each other vociferously. One of the ways that you can curb that and get your entire revenue growth team working as one engine is by making sure that they have one leader. Finally, a couple of notes about marketing, because it's super important, epically important as a matter of fact. It's all about proportions. So make sure you have around 2-to-1 headcount from engineering to marketing. Make sure that you have 60-40 split between your program spend and your people headcount in terms of your budgeting. And one of the things that I think is most appropriate in the constitution of a marketing team is making sure you have a good mix, 50-50 mix of people who are analytical and people who are creative. So I'm running out of time, so I gotta fly through these, staying hungry. A lot of people say your first $1 million is the easiest or is the hardest million to make. Conversely, I'd like to say your Series B is the infinitely easier to spend than your seed round. The $10 million that comes after the first $1 million that you raise goes by a lot faster than the first million because you've gotten really good at spending it. Here are a couple tips to help stay hungry. Easy money, just save your miles. Like fly coach everywhere, save your miles so that you can get free tickets. Another thing is to move to the cloud. Remove as much capital expenditure as you can. Reduce the big spends and go pay-as-you-go pricing as often as you possibly can. And invest in speed. One of the best things that you can invest in is getting the tools, the gear, and the software to make your engineering team hum. Again, your most precious commodity is developer time. So any tool that you purchase that increases their speed is a tool well spent. So we are a little abbreviated, but if you'd like to see the rest of this tasty talk, you can go ahead and go to my GitHub, and you'll be able to get the rest of the slides along with an outline. I really appreciate you guys having me by. I know this was super last minute. But Montreal, you have been fantastic to us at Twilio since we came here this week, and we hope to be seeing a whole lot more of you in the future. So merci beaucoup. Thank you very, very much.